Some disturbing satellite images have been released at a point in time where tensions between the U.S. and China remain high, specifically over Taiwan. According to the images, the Chinese military has built full-scale targets of U.S. warships, including an aircraft carrier and guided missile destroyers in the middle of a northwest China desert. According to reports, these warships are being used for ballistic missile target practice. So is this a sign that China is preparing to take on the United States military? Dean Cheng, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, is here to tell us what's really going on here. Dean, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so what's your take first on these images and what we should make of it from the perspective of whether this is part of a continued provocation on the part of the Chinese Communist Party?
I don't think it's a provocation. I think it is, however, reflecting several things. One, that the Chinese are indeed planning on applying a variety of weapons against things like our carrier battle groups, which are one of our major chess pieces on the board. This shouldn't really be a surprise, though, because we've known for a number of years that the Chinese, one, are developing these kinds of weapons, but two, have actually been targeting this very area. A few years ago, there were reports of a fixed outline in the desert and of an American aircraft carrier. And in that case, there were actually impact craters around the carrier showing where the Chinese had already been firing missiles to see if they could hit that.
So how do we view this now in terms of the capabilities that China has versus U.S. surface naval craft? I mean, is this a situation where we should understand that they're going to get to a point where our Navy is at tremendous risk if, in fact, we did try to intervene in some kind of a conflict with Taiwan? I mean, essentially, how do we stack up against the capabilities the Chinese have?
That's a good question. I mean, one of the reasons why this is a significant revelation is because the Chinese carrier mock-up is apparently on tracks, which means that this thing is mobile. And one of the arguments about the Chinese anti-ship ballistic missiles has been, oh, they've never tested it against a mobile target, as though that wasn't going to happen eventually. Now, apparently, it turns out they are. And interestingly, they're doing it in the desert because it's far away from where we could pick up intelligence. If they tested it at sea, we could basically send our own platforms to go and observe this. By doing it out in the middle of their desert, we have a lot less information that we can gather about how they're doing it and how well they're doing it.
Specifically for U.S. carriers, how sound are our countermeasures against land-based missiles, land-sea missiles?
We've never actually confronted an anti-ship ballistic missile before. The Soviets never developed something like that. The other thing to keep in mind is the escorts around an American aircraft carrier will have anti-missile systems, but there's a limit to their magazine depth. That is to say, they're only going to have so many shots. So if the Chinese make a lot of these, and the Chinese always seem to build lots of these kinds of weapons, whether they're anti-ship ballistic missiles or cruise missiles or other things, you could wind up with the escorts running out of defensive shots before the Chinese run out of offensive shots. So yeah, the threat to the carriers is pretty real.
And so is this all just part of China getting to a point where it becomes clear to us that if the U.S. military did, I know we have this strategic ambiguity position with regard to Taiwan, but let's say there was a move on Taiwan by the Chinese, and the U.S. was thinking about whether there would be a military response on our end. Are they just hoping, or the Chinese just hoping, that they can raise the risk such that we would decide, not our problem, we're not going to do this, we don't want to lose a carrier group?
No, because the way that you just phrased it makes it sound like it's almost a bluff. What the Chinese are doing is two things. One, they want our leaders to think very seriously, do we want to become involved, because we could lose thousands of sailors and lives. But two, if the Americans decide to go in anyway, then yes, they will sink our carriers, they will sink our destroyers, and then they will basically say, now what? What you got now?